Good evening, Spookaroos. I wonder if it is as hot where you are as it is where I am. I am sweltering. I had to turn off the fan to record this episode for you. So I hope that you will enjoy it, and I think you will. I think you're going to dig it, because we're going to talk about UFOs again. I haven't talked about them in a little while. I felt like, maybe I talked about this too recently. It was almost a year ago was the last time we talked about any kind of UFOs or aliens. So we're about due. So here's the agenda for tonight. Of course, I'm going to tell you all about the socials before we move on. Then I'm going to talk about UFOs for a while. Then I have a big announcement. And after that, we're going to talk a little bit more about UFOs before we do our goodbyes and all that kind of stuff. So let's get right to it. Let's see, the social medias. You can find us on Instagram at SpookyAssShit, and you can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/SpookyTimesWithEricD. And there you can also join our secret closed group, the Spookaroos, but that's only if you're a true blue Spookaroo. And it is a closed group just so that we can talk about whatever kind of subjects of spooky stuff that we want without the weight of public judgment upon us. So no one needs to know how freaky or geeky we can get. Right? That's just between us friends, us Spookaroos. And also, the other thing that gives you an opportunity to find is the phone number, because we are coming up on episode 200. So for our next new episode 199, we're going to do a look back to look forward. And that is, I want to hear from you guys. I want you to call this number on the Spookaroos page, and I want you to share your memories with me of the show, your favorite parts, your favorite episodes, your favorite stories, your favorite comments, whatever it is, favorite guest hosts, least favorite guest hosts, whatever it is you want to say about the show. I want to hear it. We want to discuss it on episode 199. So please, I'm inviting you now. Join the Spookaroos, which is free. You can get the phone number there. It's a Google number. You can call the number. No one's going to answer it. It's just going to be a little message from me, and then you speak after the beep, and you've got 3 minutes to say whatever you want to say. And if what you want to say takes more than 3 minutes, go ahead and call back. No one's going to answer. It just goes right to a voicemail, so no worries there. It's a Google number. Now, I have a big announcement that's going to tie in with all this stuff, but we're going to wait for that till closer to the end of the episode. I don't know why I'm slurring my speech tonight. Probably just because it's so hot. I swear, the only thing I'm drinking over here is some LaCroix, and that is not a commercial for them. It just happened to be what I have handy. Okay, so tonight's story is the Mohawk River UFO encounters, and it comes to us from a book called Mystery of the Men in Black, the UFO Silencers. And it's by a man by the name of Timothy Green Beckley, and I have a lot more to say about him, but that's what we're going to talk about at the end of the episode. Now, our story begins with a woman named Jennifer Stevens, who Mr. Beckley describes as a, quote, highly qualified UFO investigator. Now, I don't know, ladies and gentlemen, what makes you a highly qualified UFO investigator, but I wish I knew Miss Stevens' credentials. Unfortunately, she was around long before I was born in the 1960s, and I don't know what she's up to these days, and that's a very common name, so I would imagine it would be very difficult to find her even if she was still around. But hopefully what he means by highly qualified UFO investigator is that she was some kind of maybe a fighter pilot who was familiar with all types of Army and Air Force and Navy aircraft, or maybe she worked for NASA somehow, and she understood engineering and transportation systems and all that kind of thing. Somehow I doubt that's what he means, but we just have to take his word that she is a highly qualified UFO investigator. Anyway, in the 1960s, she reports that late in the evening of April 1967, a woman, known only as Peggy G., was walking her friend to her car outside of Peggy's house when the two stopped in their tracks to observe what appeared to be a very bright star. As they watched, it grew closer until it seemed to hover just above them. Suddenly, a baseball-sized object shot out from the UFO and zipped past their heads and disappeared into a nearby row of trees. When they had turned to look back at the larger craft, it had disappeared. 6 weeks later, Peggy called researcher Jennifer Stevens to report an additional sighting near her home in Scotia, New York. She also claimed that several neighborhood pets had gone missing, and that one of her neighbors swears that, quote, little men had taken her dog. Things hadn't been going so well for Peggy either. Shortly after her initial sightings, she claimed, her home began to be plagued by, quote, poltergeist-like activity. She had seen shadowy figures appear and then disappear on several occasions. She'd also witnessed objects moving across the room, apparently of their own accord, and her cat had been acting strangely. That's the number one sign of paranormal activity. Cats acting strange, because they never do stuff like that on their own. Cats are never known to just randomly scream and run across the room at lightning speed. Never happens. But worse was yet to come for Miss Peggy. With Christmas now fast approaching, looking to make some extra money to buy gifts for her family, Peggy had taken on a part-time job at a local department store. During her second day on the job, Peggy was approached by the store's security guard. The man, whom Peggy described as looking old and yet young, said he had something he'd like to discuss with Peggy. He asked if she'd be willing to eat lunch with him that day. Since they'd just be eating in the break room together, Peggy didn't see much harm and agreed to eat lunch with the man. As they ate, he explained that he was part of a secret organization known as the Cosmic Brotherhood, who had been working on Earth. Red flag, Peggy, red flag. But nope, she continues to sit and eat lunch with this man. He further explained that he was, in fact, centuries old, and had once been a professor at an Ivy League college. A nearby coworker had been eavesdropping on the entire conversation, and he chimed in with his own opinion of the security guard, muttering as he walked by that the guard was crazy. At this point, the guard jumped up and half shouted, "If you don't get away from here and forget what you've heard, I'll turn myself into the most horrible thing you've ever seen." Peggy watched as rays of light shot from the security guard's eyes. Her coworker fled the break room in terror. The next day, the security guard failed to report to work, and Peggy had never seen him again. Investigator Jennifer Stevens also attempted to locate the security guard, but she also had no luck. In February of 1968, just months after Peggy's incidents, in the same part of New York, 2 men called researcher Stevens to report that they had seen a UFO hovering over the Mohawk River. They also said that they thought they had seen a white-suited man standing on the banks of the river near the craft. The next day, researcher Stevens reports, just 300 yards from where the UFO had been sighted, police discovered the frozen body of a 16-year-old boy. Now, the coroner would eventually rule that this death was accidental and the cause was exposure, but neither the coroner nor the police could explain why tracks found near the body showed that he had apparently been running, then dragging one foot as if he'd been carried from above. For several subsequent nights following the boy's death, researcher Stevens, her husband, and a, quote, local UFO organization patrolled the riverbanks of Scotia to see if they could gather further clues/evidence of UFOs in the area. Now that's luck. That's luck that there just happens to be a local UFO investigation group nearby. I'm not doubting that that's true, by the way. I'm just saying it's handy. That's all. There are people who are very interested in UFOs. There are lots of people with lots of various interests. I could say, you could say that the Spookaroos are a group of people with an interest in the paranormal, although I would not describe ourselves as UFO organization or even investigators, but some of us might be. Some of us might be super into this stuff. So, hey, good on you. It's nice to have a hobby. After several nights of freezing our toes and noses, says Jennifer Stevens, we had a good sighting of our own. An oval, glowing red object hovered near us in silence. Its glow blinked on and off in a rhythmic pattern. I used my flashlight to signal back in an identical manner. In a moment, the UFO blinked back. This exchange went on for several minutes, and then the UFO began to come towards us. The hair on the back of my neck began to stand up. Had I done something stupid? Were we in trouble? Just then, a plane appeared over our head, and the UFO blinked and disappeared from view. Several days later, researcher Stephen's husband was eating at the counter of a local diner. Although there were plenty of stools available, a stranger entered the diner and immediately sat next to Mr. Stevens. Without any kind of introduction, the stranger said, "There have been many people watching the sky every night down by the river in Scotia." Surprised that the stranger seemed to know what the Stevens had been up to, Mr. Stevens said, "Excuse me? Who are you?" The stranger replied, "That is not important. But I will say this. People who look for UFOs should be very, very careful." And with that, the stranger got up and left. It was after this that the Stevens began experiencing poltergeist-like activity in their own home, just the same as Peggy G had months earlier. Researcher Stevens called Peggy to check in with her and compare their disturbances. Peggy said that the strange goings-on had indeed continued in her home, but there had been a new twist. She'd been having a lot of trouble with her phone. The phone would ring at all hours of the night, and if Peggy answered, she would hear only silence or some kind of electrical noises. Further, Peggy claimed, she had witnessed two pale-skinned men stringing some kind of silver tape over the phone wires connected to her home. As she watched the men, Peggy called the police. When she gave the police her address, the two men immediately dropped what they were doing and fled the area. As Peggy continued to explain the situation to police, she heard the officer murmur, "Oh, the silver tape thing again." Everyone involved began to notice a blue Lincoln Continental would occasionally park outside their homes, though no one ever saw anyone enter or exit the vehicle. About 4 years after Peggy's first reported sightings, the UFOs stopped appearing in the skies over the Mohawk River, and all the strange activity around Peggy and the Stevens homes stopped. So, what were the UFOs? Who or what killed the frozen 16-year-old boy? Who were the strange men harassing Peggy and the Stevens? Unfortunately, Mr. Beckley never gives us any answers, not directly, anyway. The book goes on to present numerous other stories and theories that the Beckleys heard from so-and-so or found in the files of blankety-blank, but the true story of just who or what these so-called UFO silencers really are is so complicated and so bizarre, it will take up a whole nother episode in the future. I will give you one clue, however. Let's just say Mr. Beckley wouldn't be getting any love notes from the Stop Asian Hate movement. So obviously, with the fact being that these stories were taken from a book called The UFO Silencers, Mystery of the Men in Black, you can imagine that the speculation that Mr. Timothy Green Beckley presents is that these are some kind of Men in Black activity, even if they weren't necessarily wearing black or driving around in black cars or whatever. But this is, the prototype of a Men in Black story that we hear repeated often by people who claim to have witnessed UFOs. And especially if they come in contact with material from a spaceship. And, these Men in Black always seem very eager to take control of such situations and eager to regain the items that were taken from the ship. But who are these mystery men? Who are these people? Well, like I said, we're going to cover that in a future episode, and we're going to talk a little bit more about Timothy Green Beckley tonight at the end of this episode. But before we do, I want to tell you my big news, because Mr. Beckley Green, his story, it connects to the stories that we just talked about, obviously, since he's the researcher that presented them, but it's kind of its own thing, so it seems like this is a natural break. So let me tell you the big news. And the big news is, at your urging, Spookaroos, and with a lot of trepidation, if you will, I have started a Patreon page. It's patreon.com/witchfinder. As you hear at the end of every episode now, since we changed the name and everything, Spooky Times is a Witchfinder production. While I'm trying to put both my activities as the official Witchfinder of Salem and my activities here on the podcast together into one brand under the umbrella of Witchfinder Productions. So, if you go to patreon.com/witchfinder, all one word, you will find the Patreon page. And there's different tiers you can join. And it's really just however much you are willing to give, be it $3, $5, or $10 per month, for as long as you wish to give. And you can get different things at different tiers, but you always will get your name in the credits of any videos I do for the Witchfinder or Spooky Times. That is not including the ones that are sent out automatically, where it's just the audio version of the podcast on YouTube. I don't have control over those videos. They just go out automatically once I publish an episode. So the names won't be in the credits of those. But I'm planning to do more videos that will go on YouTube for both the podcast and for the Witchfinder, and your name will be on both of those videos if you join at any level. If you join at the $5 or $10 tier, then you get exclusive videos and just have some fun, you know? We'll just cut back and have some fun, whether we're talking about witches or other spooky stuff for the podcast. And you'll get random little things. Some of these people are already getting prize packages that I'm sending out. Just randomly picking people. The first person to ever donate any money and the first person from each tier, they're all getting prize packages. So you never know. So go ahead and join the Patreon if you would be so kind. That's patreon.com/witchfinder. And I'll tell you, the reason I've been nervous about doing this, we've been doing this show since 2016, 2015, 2016, something like that. And I was nervous about it because, I don't have the largest audience in the world. I've got a wonderful audience, but not the largest audience in the world. And I was afraid I'd put this out there and I'd make $5 a month and I'd be embarrassed and I'd feel like, well, that's all people feel my time is worth, even though I put a lot of work into these episodes, and I would just feel bad about myself and I'd want to cancel the whole thing. But I'm happy to report that I'm already getting more money than I suspected that I might, even though, look, I'm not looking to retire here. I'm not looking to quit my day job over this, but it would be nice to get a little something for all the work that I do. So I appreciate everybody who has joined up, and I hope that more of you will join us, and it'll encourage me to keep making product for you folks, and that you will enjoy the videos that we put up there and the other exclusive content for the Patreons to come in the future. So that's the deal with Patreon, patreon.com/witchfinder. Okay, now let's talk about Timothy Green Beckley. I did not know anything about this man. Now, I have been interested in the paranormal and UFOs and all that kind of stuff, cryptids, spooky stuff, since I was a little boy. But I can't say that I ever really focused so much on UFOs. But I was not familiar with the name Timothy Green Beckley. Maybe I'd seen him on TV specials where he might have been talking about UFOs or Men in Black or other things that he covered in his numerous books. But yeah, I'd never seen his books. I was unfamiliar with him. I found this book. Some of you might recall if you follow me on Instagram. I posted a picture from a antiques mall that I like to visit, and there was one weekend where there was just a whole section of like occult and supernatural books, and this is where I found this book, The UFO Silencers, and it looks like something that somebody printed at home, and it's a big thick book with a man in a fedora, and his face kind of darked out, but he seems to have glowing eyes. And a cool picture on the back of UFOs and stuff like that. So I said, yeah, let me pick this up. It was like $2, and I took that home with me, and that's where tonight's stories came from. And I started reading this book, and there is some absolute batshit crazy stuff in here. And we have only begun to climb this mountain, let me tell you. And I know this was kind of a short story tonight, but I just wanted to tease you a little bit tonight with this story. There's going to be a lot more that we hear from the UFO Silencers, because Timothy Green Beckley, when you're, as a skeptic, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt when they are telling me paranormal stories or, strange and bizarre things like stuff about aliens and UFOs, I like to believe, even if in my heart of hearts, I feel that they are mistaken, I like to believe at least that they believe what they are telling me and that they have their own reasons for believing it, and that maybe I can, maybe I'll disagree or whatever, but I'll at least come away respecting the person. And so that's what my hope was for Mr. Green Beckley. I thought, I might not agree with everything he says here, but let's see what he has to say. I'm sure, maybe he takes himself very seriously, and let's just look at the research that he presents. But once you start reading this book, you realize pretty quickly you are in the hands of what seems to be a madman. In a good way, though, because it's very entertaining, and these are the kinds of stories you want to hear if you're interested in UFOs. Because how many times can you hear, like, oh, I was in bed and I thought I saw maybe something standing over me, and then they took me up to their ship and they probed me, and then I was brought back down. It's not that those stories are terrible, but once you've heard them, you've heard them, So this UFO Silencers has some kind of stories that, even if they're not necessarily the most dramatic stories, they're still entertaining. There's one about a boy who was given a pen by a spaceman, and then this other guy came into his house and then took the pen back and started running around like Daffy Duck in the old cartoons, where he's like bouncing off his head going, woo, woo, woo. And the researcher found it because the kid drew a picture of a UFO and put it up at school, and it had, nothing to do with what the researcher was there for, but he just happened to see it. So there's all kinds of stories like that and better. So we'll definitely be talking more from this book, but I had to look up this guy, Timothy Green Beckley, and I found many biographies that appear to have been written by the man himself, and the short version goes something like this. Timothy Green Beckley is a well-known ufologist and author. He wrote and published books on creatures, weird phenomena, and flying saucers. He's had so many careers, even his girlfriends can't explain what he does. Okay? Since an early age, his life has more or less revolved around the paranormal. At the age of 3, his life was saved by an invisible force. The house he was raised in was thought to be haunted. His grandfather saw the Headless Horseman. Beckley has also undergone out-of-body experiences starting at the age of 6. He saw his first of 3 UFOs when he was but 10, and has had 2 more sightings since, including an attempt to communicate with one of these objects. Now, in addition to writing several books, which we'll get to in a second, he also appeared in some movies. And this is where the biography was enough to make me question Mr. Green and the purity of his methods, research methods, and his intent. But then, we look at the movies, and serious researchers and scientists and people who study things, they're not known for being actors. But on the other hand, you have someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson. He appears on TV a lot, and he's appeared in, pop culture TV shows and stuff like that. And you wouldn't take away from his credentials, right? So it's possible that even, people who do very serious work can have a sense of humor about themselves and appear in certain things. The thing is, most of the movies that Mr. Timothy Green Beckley appears in, produced, sometimes, and I think directed on 1 or 2 occasions, they are mostly dirty movies. His credits include titles like Barely Legal Lesbian Vampires, Talk Dirty to Me Part 4, Black Girls in Heat, Great Sexpectations, Hot Licks, Supergirls Do the Navy, Blood-Sucking Vampire Freaks, Skin-Eating Jungle Vampires, and The Sandy Hook Lingerie Party Massacre. Now that title hits me extra hard, of course, with the tragedy in Sandy Hook, but I should point out that this is a movie that was made in the year 2000 and references Sandy Hook, New Jersey, not Sandy Hook in Newtown, Connecticut. So it's not a parody of that situation. It's just an unfortunate name that happens to coincide with that. Now, as I said, he wrote many, many books. If you go on Amazon, you can find digital copies of most of his works, including such colorful names as Round Trip to Hell in a Flying Saucer, Alien Bloodlust, It's Okay to be gray. Of course, the UFO Silencers, the book that our story came from tonight, and a book that I've definitely got to check out, a book called Screwed by Aliens, True Sexual Encounters with E.T. Whoa boy. His newest book, Alien Lives Matter, was released in February of 2021. So very topical, Mr. Timothy Green Beckley. Now, I did learn a shocking bit of information about Mr. Green Beckley in my research. I am recording this episode on the night of Monday, June 7th, and it turns out this man that I had never heard of, that I just started learning about, this past weekend, turns out he just passed away on Memorial Day. Just 1 week ago from this very night is when Mr. Timothy Green Beckley passed away. So even though we've poked a little bit of fun at him here, he seems like the type of guy that might have had a sense of humor about himself. And of course, I feel for anyone who knew him personally. And, we're going to have some fun with his works, that's for sure. But, my sympathies are with those who actually knew the man and loved him, because I'm sure, and I hope, that there were people out there who knew and loved Timothy Green Beckley. And if nothing else, if I can say nothing else nice about the guy, I can say he has left behind some very entertaining stories for us, and I'm sure that his other books have very similarly entertaining stories as well. And he wasn't just about aliens, ladies and gentlemen. He also had books about werewolves and vampires and all kinds of things. So we're going to have to check out those. Also, John Lennon. He was a big John Lennon fan, I guess. And as am I. So we'd have that in common, too. So that is the story on Timothy Green Beckley. And that brings us to the conclusion of this week's episode. I want to remind you again, follow me on Instagram at SpookyAssShit or Witchfinder of Salem. They are both mine. And you know what? Follow them both. And of course, the Facebook page is facebook.com/spookytimes with Eric D. Don't forget to join the secret closed group, the Spookaroos. There, it's free to join, of course, and you can get the phone number to call in and tell me your favorite episodes. And please, please, please do that, guys. I want to use the audio as part of episode 198, the very next new episode. So you'll have a little under 2 weeks to get those calls in. This phone number is also available on the Patreon page. So if you go to patreon.com/witchfinder, that's patreon.com/witchfinder, you can join at any level there, and you will be able to get that phone number to call in and also leave your thoughts about the show, your memories of the show, and I would so love to hear from you, and I hope that I will soon. We're going to have all kinds of cool stuff up on the Patreon page, including exclusive videos, maybe even exclusive episodes in the future. Who knows? Whatever you guys want, whatever you guys think would be a fair trade. And I'm just so happy for the people that have supported me all this time, whether it's through the Patreon or just by listening each and every week, or people who have given to other fundraisers that we've done in the past. Your support means the world to me, which is what I basically tell everybody who chimes in, but it really does. And, this entire show, all of Witchfinder Productions, is a one-man operation at this point. Maybe someday, with enough Patreon donations, that will change. But for now, it's a one-man operation, and it's an awful lot of work. But I like to do it. I enjoy meeting you guys. I enjoy hearing from you. And let's just keep on talking about spooky stuff together. So however you can show your support would be wonderful. If you can't do it financially, don't worry. You can also leave a kindly worded review on iTunes or wherever you happen to listen from. That would also mean a lot to me as well, and show me that you're listening, you love the show, you want it to continue as we march on to 200 episodes. Episode 199, like I said, is going to be a look back before we move forward. It's going to have some surprises for you, something top secret that Brian, Tony, and I and some other people have been working on to bring to you just as like something kind of fun. And then, of course, episode 200 is a big episode with multi-guests and a topic that I think a lot of you are going to get a big kick out of. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And until next time, don't be afraid.
Spooky Times is a Witchfinder production.